All right, good morning, everyone. And again, welcome to the Sage Live January 2025. Before we start, I'm just going to remind everyone, or if you're new, let you know a bit about the Sage Journey and how that fits into Sage Live. So Sage Journey is a program whose mission is to inspire and encourage students to explore STEM careers in the future. We do this by offering free summer camps at a variety of national labs, paid internships at those labs, professional growth sessions, and many opportunities to connect with professionals who care about you and your future. And Sage Live is part of the Sage Journey. It's an online gathering of students who have attended summer camp and are curious about the next steps in their Sage journey. It's a time to reconnect with the Sage volunteers. It is held monthly between August and May. And the topics that we cover are relevant to your journey, whether it's career related, such as designing your life, resume workshops, how to prepare for an interview, or if it's just new and exciting topics like biology, quantum computing, AI, and machine learning. I am Andrea Albert. I'm a physicist at Los Alamos National Lab, and I have been involved with organizing the summer camp that we do out here for the last 2 years. And I've been part of Sage for the same amount of time. And so I'm really excited to have you all here and hear from our speakers because I'm in the physics division. And so I don't know anything about what they do in the biology department, in the biology division. So I'm really excited. Today we have two speakers who will talk about their journey and their work. Our first speaker is Ethan McBride. Dr. McBride earned his PhD in analytic chemistry from the University of North Texas, working with Professor Guido Verbeck on illicit drug impurity characterization and synthetic pathway analysis, including amphetamines and fentanyl analogs. He then took a National Research Council postdoctoral research position at Combat Capabilities Development Command Chemical Biological Center in Edgewood, Maryland, under Dr. Trevor Glaris. Since joining Los Alamos within the bioscience division, he has continued to pursue small molecule work using real-time breath analysis, as well as leading an effort on bacterial identification using portable instruments. He's published over 20 peer-reviewed papers and holds 1 patent. Dr. McBride is currently a member of the American Society for Mass Spectrometry and the International Association of Breath Research, the Gesellschaft Deutscher Chemiker, and a member of the Royal Society of Chemistry. And in his spare time, he loves camping, which is good that he's in Los Alamos. We've got some great camping and hiking spots. Gardening and studying history. And so, Ethan, go ahead and share your screen and I'll turn it over to you.
Fantastic. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I can hear you.
Delightful. Okay, thank you for that intro. Let me see if I can get my screen shared here. How does that look?
I can see it.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for having me. I'm going to talk today kind of about sort of my journey from where I started to get here. Just as a little bit of background, my name is Ethan McBride. I'm a scientist and a first-line manager here in the biochemistry and biotechnology group at LANL. I've been here for about 3 years. Absolutely have fallen in love with New Mexico. You'll see I've kind of bounced around the U.S., but it's probably my favorite place I've ever lived. So originally I was actually born in East Texas. I did my undergrad at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville. They had kind of a cool program where you could kind of co-major in a language and a science. So I actually did chemistry and German. All the German that I learned was easily the most fun I had there, way more fun than chemistry. So I highly recommend if you have an opportunity. But basically, from there, whenever I graduated, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I looked into going to officer candidate school. Really was just kind of unsure of what the next step was, and applied to a bunch of grad schools. Got a bunch of the dates wrong. Didn't get into any of those. And the very last school I applied to happened to be University of North Texas. So I guess the first lesson here is, screw up often. That's okay. You'll be fine. I promise. So ended up going to grad school in North Texas for 4 years. Worked for my advisor, Dr. Guido Verbeck. I love people calling him Guido. It makes me so happy. And while I was there, originally thought I wanted to be an organic chemist. That did not work out for me, and ended up moving into a group that did something called mass spectrometry, which is an analytical chemistry technique. Absolutely loved it as soon as I started doing it. So I got to do a little bit of organic chemistry and that. So again, came to grad school with one idea, ended up doing something completely different. Absolutely loved my time there. Had a great roommate while I was there. My dog, Melvin, pictured here. I actually got him my first semester. Can also highly recommend that. And I also met my wife while I was there. This is us at the Balloon Fiesta in Albuquerque. So I had a great time. So from there, actually, my roommate moved off and worked at DevCom CBC first. So he did his postdoc there, and then ended up getting a real job, and invited me along, basically. And so moved, my dog, my wife, across the country to Maryland, and ended up doing a postdoc there for 2 years in Edgewood. Again, absolutely loved it. Had a great time. Most of the time at the end of your postdoc, you have to move on to something else, find a different job. And so I actually ended up working in Syracuse, New York, for a company called Inficon. They had actually been some collaborators we'd worked with in grad school. So again, just who you know, right? Worked in Syracuse for about 2 years, and lo and behold, my old boss in Maryland and my old roommate from grad school had both moved out to Los Alamos, and they said, "You guys got to come out here." So drug my family across the country again, ended up in Los Alamos. We've been here for about 3 years now and just absolutely love it. It's a fantastic place. I'm trying not to tell people about New Mexico. So just as some background on some of the work I've done, it's kind of bounced all over the place. I kind of feel like I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. So in grad school, I actually worked on a project called the drug sniffing car. So we took some of the instrumentation we had in the lab, put it into an all-electric vehicle, used it to drive around and look for meth labs. I got to do some hands-on work, some organic chemistry, just a really, really cool project. Had a lot of fun doing that. Whenever I moved off and did my postdoc, I got to work on some completely different things. So I did like chemical warfare agent detection. Edgewood, Maryland has a long history of doing that kind of research. So I got to meet a lot of really cool people, work on some really cool research, had a blast doing that. And then whenever I moved off to Inficon, one of my favorite projects is I got to work on a project called Mass Spectrometer Observing Lunar Operations, or MSOLO, which basically, if we want to go to Mars, we really need a moon base. And if we're going to have a moon base, we really need to find water on the moon. We can't really take it with us. And so that instrument was basically for looking for water in the regolith that's on the surface. So you can see me pictured there in front of headquarters in Florida. Absolutely had a blast working on that project. Again, had no idea that's what I was going to be working on whenever I got there, but just had so much fun. From there, now I've moved to Los Alamos in New Mexico. I've been to one of these places, which is great. New Mexico, you think desert, you think hot, you think dry. Especially northern New Mexico is just an outdoor paradise. I can't say this enough. It's absolutely beautiful. I'm from East Texas. I have no idea what seasons are. There are actual seasons in New Mexico. It's fantastic. But since we've moved out here, I live just outside of Los Alamos in a small town called Espanola. But this is basically what my commute looks like every day. I mean, there's beautiful mountains on both sides. It's an absolutely gorgeous place to live. We say all the time, we live in a painting. It's unbelievable. But, really small town here. Obviously, the elevation is crazy. I'm living and driving somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 feet. Everybody tells you to take it easy whenever you move here, and you'll start moving some boxes and almost black out. You'll figure out pretty quickly the elevation's pretty crazy. But again, absolutely beautiful weather, wonderful seasons. The spring and the fall here are beautiful. For the one person on from New York, I'm not saying that the trees here are as pretty as the ones in New York in the fall. That would be sacrilege, but it's still pretty great. So obviously, if any of you have seen the Oppenheimer movie, you're probably fairly familiar with what Los Alamos does. But there's a long history of science going on here. I can tell you for a fact that this is the one place I've ever worked where it really feels like all of the scientists here are excited about the work that they're doing, generally don't get in each other's way. We love to collaborate, and generally just kind of have fun doing a lot of work that they do. And I've never worked in a place like that before. For as huge as Los Alamos, the lab is like 18,000 people. It feels like a lot of people just wake up and they're excited to do science every day. So pretty cool place to work. This is kind of what it looks like from the sky. Again, Los Alamos is absolutely massive. It's about the same size as DC. These are old statistics. Our budget now is actually almost $8 billion. It's an absolutely massive complex. Again, there's like 18,000 people that work here. I have some slides on this at the back end, but I just want to say that if you're ever interested in looking for internship possibilities and things like that, looking for summer work, Los Alamos is a fantastic place to do either one of those things. It's a really fun environment. There's just tons of students that come in every semester, all over the summer. We love having summer students. But it's a really neat place, and there's so much research that goes on here. I could spend the whole time talking about all the different things that people do. Physics, biology, chemistry, any kind of radiochemistry, things like that you can think of. I've got a slide at the end. Just start looking on the website. If it's something you're interested in, you'll probably find it. So I work in the bioscience division, which is kind of crazy because everything I've told you up to this point shows that I'm a chemist. So don't tell anybody in biology. But as it turns out, biology, it really is applied chemistry. And so I've gotten to do some new kind of cool research since I've been here, things I'd never done before, kind of a common theme throughout my life. But the watchword for biosciences is that we are trying to do mission-driven science and innovation, protecting the nation from biological and environmental threats. So that's basically our bioscience division is split into thirds. That's me on the left. What you don't see is everybody behind the camera saying stuff to try to make me laugh. So I'm absolutely laughing while I'm trying to give this breath sample. But basically in BTech, we are doing research just to broadly address any kind of biological or chemical threat, which is very similar to the work that I had done before. But we have a lot of cool capabilities. We love working with people in the genomics labs and the microbiome biome sciences. There's tons of environmental work that goes on at Los Alamos too. We love finding ways to try to collaborate with those folks. Again, it's all about finding people that you like to hang out with and just start talking to them and seeing, what does their research look like? Are there ways to collaborate? I feel like for most of my life, most of the interesting places I've gone and interesting things I've done have happened because of people I've met or conversations I've had. So, absolutely what I would say is get out there, meet people, never be afraid to try something you haven't done before. So this is what our research group looks like. I work in the Mass Spectrometry Center for Integrated Omics, which is another mouthful. But essentially, we, in the last 3 years, whenever we started here, there was basically nobody working in this lab. So we've had to hire tons of people, get tons of equipment. So everything here is, the building is absolutely not new, but most of the equipment is. Really cool and exciting place to work. This is a picture of most of my coworkers from a conference we went to 2 years ago. I can say this is the first place I've ever worked where I have kind of gotten to have a hand in choosing or talking to all the people that I get to work with. And I feel like that is such an unbelievable privilege. I hang out with these people all the time after work. We really dig into each other's lives. It's really great to have just a ton of people that you love to work with. And then at 5 o'clock, you love to go hang out with afterwards. It's really, really fantastic. A couple of the projects I'm currently working on. So breath research is actually something that got funded right before I showed up to LANL. But essentially, the idea is what are the chemicals that are in just the average person's breath? A lot of this information is kind of known, but we're not really sure. And so we actually got 30 different volunteers from LANL, scientists, to come in and give breath samples. And we kind of analyzed what the average person's breath looked like, which was super interesting. None of these people fasted, so we got to see all sorts of crazy things like food metabolites. If you're using Burt's Bees as often as I do, so 50 times a day, that stuff absolutely shows up. The Southwest is very dry. So we got to see all these compounds that show up in the average person's breath, which was just really, really cool. But the really cool part was that they got to walk right up to the instrument and actually give their breath into the instrument. And I got to watch the data come in as they were giving their breath, which was really, really cool. So just a super fun project. And we published that one last year. The other project that I've been working on currently is actually looking at bacterial identification. So let's say that you went into the doctor's office and you had like a urinary tract infection. Most of the time, they're going to give you some antibiotics. Good chance they're not going to be the right ones. So you'll go home, they'll culture some bacteria, they'll try to figure out what it is, and a couple of days later, they'll call you back and they'll get you the right antibiotics. So the idea was, could we try to figure out what the bacteria is and take that from a couple of days to the answer to maybe even a couple of hours? So we're using this really cool scan technique that we developed in our lab to try to identify these bacteria, even from dirty samples like urine and things like that. So being able to do all of that on not big, expensive equipment that we would have in our lab, but on smaller portable instruments that might be cheaper and maybe easier to get into, say, like a clinic somewhere. But basically being able to get the answer to whatever that bacteria is really quickly. So that's kind of some of the work I've been working on. Both of these have been published. They were super cool projects. I basically got brought in to run them, which was also terrifying because I'd never done that before. I had to manage a team for both of these projects, but they went really, really well. So in my last couple of slides, I just wanted to say there are tons of research opportunities at LANL. Again, this is old. There are probably more listings than this. We absolutely will take high school students all the way up through like really senior scientists. So my best advice is just start trolling this website and just looking for stuff that's interesting. Have your resumes and stuff handy and just start applying for some of these. It's not uncommon that we'll go through cycles where, we want to hire, say like postbacks and things like that. And then sometimes whenever we can't. So just check back all the time. And we love, if you're in the middle of your undergrad, that's a great time to get in and start doing some research, especially if this is something that you think you want to do long term. Having that research experience under your belt, maybe from a semester or two or a couple of summers, absolutely makes you just a rock star in the lab. So we love being able to provide that opportunity for folks. So like I said, just troll through there. And again, you may find something that is not something you would have thought you were interested in, but after reading through it, maybe you thought it was. I can tell you this, most of the folks at LANL, we love getting emails like that from undergrads and high school students who are, hey, if you have a spot, that'd be great. I'm really excited about the research that you do. We love those emails. So please just reach out to folks. And just final slide. I love this so much. This is literally on my drive home. I am somewhere deep in the background there. I'm from East Texas. It's flat. It's hot. It's kind of ugly. This place is absolutely like living in a painting. And I can't say enough about how much I've enjoyed living here and just being able to do really cool science and work with really cool people. So with that, I think I am about at time. I'll take any questions.
Yeah, thank you. And I will say that you don't have to live in New Mexico to do an internship at the lab. So those of you from California and New York, check it out. And you have some wonderful people at Los Alamos in your network, myself included. And so if you do apply for an internship, let the SAGE volunteers know, and we can try to hook you up with a research group that aligns with what you want to do. All right. Are there any questions? Please type them in chat. I can get the ball rolling. Oh, wait, nope, we've got a question. Um, can you elaborate on your experience having a chemistry background while working in a biology environment? Did you do a lot of self-learning outside of work to learn biology and stay on pace? Or would you say a lot of biology learning comes on the job? What would you recommend for students to succeed in environments where their background is completely different than the job they're in?
That's a great question. You have described basically my whole career. And it's even worse than that. When I was an undergrad, I actually never even took a biology course. It was not required for my degree. So I really was at a disadvantage. I can tell you for a fact that it does not matter what your background is. Number one, if you are just absolutely crushing it at whatever task you are handed, people recognize that right off the bat. That sort of drive is absolutely something that will serve you. Even if you're a chemist working in a bioscience division, it doesn't matter. That is critical for success. Being really open to meeting new people. All of the success I have had in my career has been because of somebody I knew that said, "Hey, we really need help doing X. I know this isn't really exactly your background, but we know that you are a go-getter. You work hard. You're really loyal. We'd love you to come work with us." We in our group really always say that we hire the person, not the skill set. You can teach a skill set, but you're hiring a person. That's who you have to spend the day with. That would be my best advice. Um, Other than that, yes, 100%. If you can take time out of your 9 to 5 to read up on stuff, reading papers, finding people to talk to, things like that, it will make you absolutely deadly at your job. It will be fantastic. So yeah, I've had to do a lot of, outside of normal work hours, reading and things like that, finding people to talk to. I promise you, it's just like investing in your retirement. If you start doing it now, it will pay so many dividends later. So yeah, absolutely. I would say find ways outside of your normal grind to read up, study, get excited about things, learn about new concepts. And at the end of the day, just crush whatever tasks you're given. I'm telling you right now, that is number one driver for success.
Yeah, thank you. And just to add to that, if you are a summer intern at a lab or even a university, they're going to have talks like seminars and colloquia. And that is a great opportunity to learn about something you don't know anything about. And then, if you go and talk with people afterwards, networking is key. Um, so don't be afraid to go to a seminar where you don't know anything and talk to the person afterwards. Okay, we have another question. How are the skills you learned during your PhD applicable or transferable to what you're doing now?
Yeah, another good question. So most of the instrumentation that I used in my grad school experience, so mass spectrometry, that's what our lab is built around. So even though I'm not applying it for looking at illicit drug manufacture, it's still the same instrumentation. We're just applying it to different problems. So having that background, that really good theory and knowledge about what these instruments are, how they can be used, how they could help other people with research that they're doing, those are a lot of the skills that I was able to bring into this job. And again, there were conversations with people that I would have in grad school on things totally unrelated to what I did. And it was always exciting to see how they maybe in their research field would have a problem that was just, they had no solution. They had no idea what to do. And all it took was getting two people in the room talking about the things that they do. And it's like, oh my gosh, I have this thing that can solve this problem that you have. There is nothing more exciting. So that happens all the time here. We have this instrumentation and stuff in our lab, and we can apply it to a whole host of problems outside of just what we are working on.
Awesome. And so I think we have time for one more question. Laya wants to know, it says that she's interested in biology and just science in general. And so she's curious if you know about career options in bioengineering or biotech that are out there.
Absolutely. We do tons of that at the lab. I would say that That's a pretty broad question, pretty broad field. That's great. I think that there are, gosh, there's so many research areas you could go into for that. My advice would be start from a list there, if that's where you're going to start bioengineering, and start whittling it down. What are particular things in that field that interest you? This happens all the time. You just start reading about something and you think, oh my gosh, I love this. I love this concept. I love this idea. I might actually waste 4 years of my life studying this to get a doctorate. This is fantastic. So absolutely, there are, gosh, so many different research opportunities. And again, specifically at LAML, there's tons of them. There's tons of universities you can go to, really strong programs. If you want to go, straight into a job after undergrad or something like that, also tons of places you could work. It's a very, very broad field. So I would say take that big idea, start to whittle it down, and you'll find something that you think is super cool, which is, again, like the most exciting part of this job.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ethan. It is time to move on. And so we're actually going to have 3 speakers today. And so our second speaker is going to be Jessica Lalonde. Jessica is a postdoctoral fellow in the bioscience division at Los Alamos. She uses a combination of computer science, statistics, and lab equipment to design and characterize materials made from biological sources. She loves material science and biology and started doing research in these areas as an undergraduate at Case Western Reserve University. As a graduate student, she did her PhD at Duke University and studied how plastic degrades in the environment and studied how we can design more sustainable, biodegradable plastic materials. She's currently studying how machine learning, material science, and biology can be combined to make more sustainable jet fuel produced by bacteria. She's originally from Michigan and has traveled a lot. And she loves to run on the trails in Santa Fe, where she lives, write, cook, and play video games for fun. So I'm going to turn it on over to Jessica.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep, I can hear you just fine.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Thank you so much for inviting me today, and thank you for the great introduction. I'm really excited to share my story with you and to talk more about my time at LANL. I think LANL is a really unique place, and I'm looking forward to sharing more with you about it. I think Ethan, the previous speaker, did a really good job of giving an overview of Los Alamos and kind of like the different parts of bioscience at bioscience at LANL. So sad, and then so my name is Jessica Lalonde in Santa Fe now, and I'm really enjoying my time here. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you a few details about my time in Los Alamos and elsewhere. Also, my internet it might be a little bit shaky, so if I get disconnected for a second, I can rejoin in just a minute. Yeah, so my name is Jessica. My favorite food and book are listed here. I like Ratatouille. It's also a movie, but it's also a really good food. I don't know if you guys have ever tried it before, but it's delicious. And I don't know if you can tell how big of a nerd I am based on my book choice, but I'm like very much a nerd. And I think that everyone at Los Alamos is just a little bit odd in terms of like choices and being like kind of a nerd. So it's like a perfect environment for me and for anyone who has like hobbies that are just a little bit odd. So yeah, so I love fiction. I love adventure stories, and I always, when I was growing up, books were my favorite thing in the entire world. And I wanted to learn more about the world through books, and that's actually how I got into science in general. So I really love writing, I love reading, and I just got into pottery. And I'm also really into trail running and cycling, which are very popular events here at the at Santa Fe and in Los Alamos. And yeah, I really, really just like creating and, you know, working with other types of creative outlets, which I think is super important when it comes to a career in STEM. Is like, it's nice to have some kind of way to turn your brain into doing something different other than what you do every single day. And I think it's really great to show that like you can have something that you absolutely love as a hobby, but then you don't necessarily have to do it as your job, but you can still really enjoy it, and that made me really happy. So that's just a little bit more about me. And so what did I study? So when I was in high school, I actually studied creative writing. And, you know, I went to this conservatory for music called Interlochen Arts Academy in Michigan. And I didn't study any STEM at all, literally no STEM. I think that I took my first chemistry and physics and full calculus class when I was in my freshman year of college. So if you don't have any interest in like hard sciences and hard STEM, it's totally okay. Like I didn't do any of that until college. I definitely like focused more on the art side of my life and my hobbies first. Um, when I graduated from high school, I had literally no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And I was getting a lot of pressure from a lot of different sources about like choosing something. I wasn't mature enough to go to college right away, and because I graduated pretty early, and I also knew that what I really wanted to do was to communicate with people. But I didn't really know the best way of doing that because at the time writing was becoming more of like a chore rather than like something I actually really enjoyed, which is a shame because it's the thing that I love most in the world. So I decided instead of going to college, I actually just took a gap year. And I think when people hear the word gap year, they think of like traveling and going to expensive places and you know doing whatever. But and all of that is wonderful. And if that's what you really want to do, you absolutely can. But when I graduated from high school, I had no money and I had no resources to go anywhere other than to work. So I decided that I was going to apply for a program called City Year AmeriCorps. And it's a domestic version of the Peace Corps, but because you know when you're working with kindergartners and you know like fifth graders, you know you absolutely need to communicate clearly and be organized and be able to express yourself in a very understandable way. So I supported K-5 students in English literacy, math, and social emotional learning. And what that meant was basically working with students to teach them how to express themselves in a positive way and handle their emotions in a positive way. And I think in turn, by doing that, I also learned how to do that for myself, which was a really beautiful thing. So I'm all for gap years. I think they're wonderful additions to the timeline of people's lives. And I think that there's a lot of concern from my guidance counselor when I was talking to him in high school about, you know, whether or not I would go to college at all. And I thought, well, shoot, you know, if it's really that bad that I wouldn't go, I better get out now. So I don't think there was any worry at all in me, like, you know, leaving and then never coming back. But I don't think that it's fair to say that there's only one path forward in life. So I really think that gap years give people a great opportunity to reflect on what's important to them and to, you know, move forward into the future. So gap year was really great for me. And then after that, I actually I did go to college eventually because I knew that it was going to be the right fit for me, but it's not the right fit for everybody. But I did go to college and I actually started off as an English major because I was very much entrenched in the creative writing and the art side of things, in the literary side of things. And I remember taking my first like year of classes and my physics professor being like, he was looking at his roster and he was like, why are you in my class? And so I decided that, you know, one of the things that I learned from my gap year was that I really, really love science, But I had a lot of teachers in high school tell me, and middle school tell me, that I was not good at math and I would never be good at math and I would never be good at science. And that I took that personally, and I decided that I would give it a try because I had the option in college. So while I was taking all my writing classes, I was also in English classes. I was also taking chemistry and physics and seeing what it was like. And I told myself if it was ever too hard, I would stop and I would change and I would do something else. And now I have a PhD. So it never really got that hard, but it was actually very hard, but it never made me want to quit. It was so fulfilling. So I actually changed from my major in English. I changed first to chemical engineering because I knew that I wanted to do some kind of hard STEM, but I didn't really want to do physics or chemistry. I wanted to do more of the applied engineering, and I really, really loved chemistry. But I realized very quickly that there's very little actual chemistry in chemical engineering. It's a lot of math and it's a lot of calculus and it's a lot of fluid mechanics, which are fascinating fields, and I've taken a lot of classes in those now. But it was too hard for me at the time. I just didn't understand it conceptually. And I think it's okay to change your major multiple times because I changed from English to chemical engineering to materials engineering. And the way that I switched into materials engineering, which ended up being the perfect fit for me, was I took this introductory level material. It ended up being with it instantly. And not everybody is going to experience like a connection like that, and that's okay. But I really connected with material science. I really enjoyed it. And I also, for whatever reason, I also had it in my mind that I also wanted to go to medical school. So I started taking biology classes. And from there, I realized that I actually did not want to go to medical school after spending like 2 years shadowing surgeons of different types and different types of medical professionals. I decided that instead of medicine, I actually really, really just liked biology. But I didn't want to do biomedical engineering, if that makes sense. I liked biology as its own thing. I liked materials as its own thing. And I liked biological materials. So at the end of all that, I walked out with 2 degrees and 2 minors. And I think that that was the best, well, most fulfilling path for me in college. Now, moving into grad school, I studied material science, also called polymer science. My specialty is in polymer science, or into the computer science and biomedical engineering routes. So my PhD is in mechanical engineering and material science. And I'm going to give you guys a timeline so we can talk about that. Yeah, so when I graduated in 2013, which, yeah, it's been over 10 years ago now, which is nuts. But I graduated and I moved from Michigan to my gap year in San Jose, California, which was a huge transition for me. Because I ended up meeting really good friends. I ended up meeting wonderful, wonderful peers and having the best experience of my life living alone for the first time, and trying to figure out what the relevant path forward in my life was going to be. And I gained just a little bit more consistency in my schedule too. So after AmeriCorps, when you complete the program, they actually give you a educational grant. It's a scholarship that you can use to start paying for college, and that's what I ended up doing. And I started college at Case Western Reserve. So I moved from San Jose, California, which is in a city in the Bay Area, to Cleveland, Ohio. And Cleveland, Ohio is a city in the Midwest. For people who have never been there, it was a huge transition, and I thought that I made a mistake going there a lot of times, and people would look at my application and be like, "Why are you moving to Ohio from California?" But it turned out that the college that I picked was the right combination of flexibility, resources, and being willing to accept me. Because, as I said, I had never taken a science class pretty much in my life before I got to college. And my science scores on the ACT and SAT were terrible. I think they were like in the 20th or 15th percentile. They were bad. They were really bad, which is partly also why I studied as an English major. So I was accepted by Case Western, and I'm super grateful to Case for actually giving me a chance, because I think a lot of people will look at standardized test scores and be like, this is not the right fit for you. But they gave me a chance, and it turned out to be a perfect fit. So when I was at college, I actually got the opportunity, because I took this gap year. I knew exactly what I wanted out of college. And I think that that's also part of the benefit of taking a gap year, or at least spending a couple of weeks thinking truly about what it is you want to get out of college. Because from there, I actually traveled to over 12 different countries, and I got to live in different places. My first country that I went to was a country called Haiti, which is in the Caribbean. But then from there, I went to like China, I went to Israel, I went to New Zealand. I actually lived in New Zealand for like 7 months, and it was really cool because I got to study biology when I was there. I got to finish up my biology degree at the University of Auckland. And I also got to travel to Switzerland, and I lived there for 3 months, and living in Europe was a blast because I love running and I love traveling, and that was really fun. So I would never have been able to travel to different countries if it hadn't been for pursuing this study in science and being able to study abroad with science and engineering. So yeah, so because I spent so much time doing travel and trying to figure out what I wanted prior to coming to college, I had a really good idea of how to navigate the college system by the time I finally got there. So I did a ton of lab networking, and I think there was a really great question that asked, how do you find like the research that you're going to be a good fit for you? How are you going to find like a research job at all in college or in high school? And maybe many of you already have research positions, and that's fantastic. You're way ahead of where I was. And I think that that's really exciting. But when I first joined, I was really intimidated by talking to people, and I was also really intimidated because I had no experience and I had no skills. So, but I think that that is one of the beauty benefits of joining a research lab early in college, is because many times a PI will look for students like that so that they can actually train them in their lab's methods. And it's obviously cheaper for them, but it's also a good system. It's mutually beneficial. And so I ended up joining a couple different research labs in college, from chemical engineering and battery science to biology. And I did a capstone project in shark ichthyology, which is the anatomy of sharks, which are my favorite animal. And that was really cool. And then I also got to do polymer science and other types of like evolutionary biology research, and that was really fulfilling for me. And because I loved research so much, I applied for this fellowship grant called the National GEM Consortium Fellowship, which is widely applicable to anyone who identifies as female or a minority serving a minority. And so I would encourage people to check out the National GEM Consortium. And that's actually how I got paired with Los Alamos. And, Ben did a great job of talking about the different types of science at Los Alamos. But my internship, I'm sorry, Ethan did a really good job. But my first professional internship actually was at Los Alamos that summer, and I wasn't in bioscience. I was actually in detonator science. So I was in a group, and I studied basically how the polymer parts of the detonator adhere to each other. And that was really, really interesting to me because it was an application of polymer science that was relevant for different types of projects than what I was used to. And so from there, I ended up going into a longer term relationship with the lab. And how did I get across all these different opportunities? All of it was talking to people. And I think Ethan did a really great job of emphasizing the networking and socializing aspect of science because, I never would have applied for the GEM fellowship if it hadn't been for my research advisor at the time. And she knew exactly, what to look for. And so I think you really got to talk to the people that know what they're doing as far as matching you with an appropriate fellowship. But that networking aspect is the only reason why I made it through this timeline. So after I finished my internship, I went to Duke, which is in North Carolina. So I went to a different part of the country, and it was also very fun, and it was also very difficult. And I studied plastic degradation as my dissertation topic in material science. And then now I'm actually a postdoc. Currently, I'm like 6 months into my postdoc at Los Alamos. And, Ethan showed a really great chart of bioscience, from, B-Tech and B-Gen, but I'm like the furthest right one that he showed. I'm in biome, which is microbial and biome sciences. And I got into that group by actually my original PhD advisor in Duke University transitioned to a new university after my first year in grad school. And so my networking that I did during my internship at Los Alamos actually set me up for a new advisor in graduate school. So I was advised remotely by an engineer from Los Alamos, who then I connected into the bioscience group. And I'm happy to talk more about that later, but I know that I'm running out of time, so I want to get to the end of this so we can talk more about questions. Motivation. I just wanted to say a few words about this because I think that through all of that, I truly felt like I had no idea what I was doing. And I know that it all comes together when you look back on it and you feel really good about it. And I still feel really good about it. But I think that, I went with two of the things that made me happiest in the world, science and art. And when it was very difficult to actually study and to learn more about these things, we use a word called resilience, right? And resilience is a thing where you can learn it and you can earn it. And so, after a while, you have to be very honest with yourself about what actually makes you happy, or what is fulfilling to you, because those are two different things, right? But I will say that scientific training can provide you with the skills to solve pretty much any problem. And I think that, as I said, the relationship aspects are very important in science. But I think the thing I want to emphasize out of all of that is just to be kind to people as you're going through the entire process, because you never know when you might see them again or when you need to talk to them about a problem or a resource. And so being friendly and being kind really goes a long way when it comes to meeting people. So in terms of current research, so I'm in microbial and biome sciences at Los Alamos, and when I was in graduate school, I studied the degradation of plastic. And so, our world, if you're anything like me and you like the outdoors, you know that our world has kind of a plastics problem right now. So one of the things regarding national security that is of interest to both me and Los Alamos is managing plastic waste from the beginning of its generation all the way to the end of its life cycle. So one of the ways that we did that in my dissertation was we used biological systems, basically microorganisms, to produce plastic. So the system that I work with produces a type of polyester, and we're familiar with polyesters because a lot of us wear them every day. So polyester is a type of polymer that can be broken down by water. So the system I was studying in college, in graduate school, was how does that material that is made by this organic matter, microbial system, how does that degrade? And so now in my postdoc, what I'm doing is I'm taking that exact same system and saying, okay, well, we know we can make a polymer, but we can also make jet fuel, which is pretty cool. So the way that we can translate these systems into physically meaningful relationships is through computer science. And that's how I got into computer science in general. I had never done any programming before my graduate school, but my mentor from Los Alamos, who was advising me remotely, encouraged me to pursue machine learning and statistical analysis using data science and computer science. And I tried it, and it turned out I was actually not that bad at it. So it was a really great fit, and it was more about being able to take the leap to try something new and convince my other advisor that it was a really good fit for me and to try something different. So I think I want to kind of skip through this because I know I'm kind of at the end of my time here. But if you're curious, I'm just going to leave this slide up here for a couple seconds so YouTube can record it. But some definitions, and you probably already know all these terms anyway. But if you're curious to know more about material science or biomanufacturing, I'd be happy to answer more questions about these tools too, these fields too. But I really do think it's one of those things that I want to emphasize that, you can do human research in this area of biomanufacturing, but you can also, in terms of like economics and pipeline analysis, but you can also do a lot of the actual biology in terms of actually producing a material or jet fuel in my case right now. But yeah, so I think one of the reasons why I really wanted to go to grad school in the first place was that I really loved the science and I loved the learning process. And so some examples of the research that I did as part of that exciting process was translating experimental work. So on the left here, you'll see a system where I'm actually studying the mass loss of my polyester over the course of time. And this is an example of my polyester. And so I can use a mathematical relationship to actually map that onto what I call like a profile of degradation. And you can use machine learning to understand that profile in a more quantitative way to be able to say what actually affects degradation in terms of environment, structure, other factors. And so it's really cool. You can use biology to actually generate materials and material science. And that is exactly what I was looking for. So I'm sorry, I know that I'm over time, but I just wanted to run through this really quick. At Los Alamos, my work changes pretty much every day. I think I would say 80% of my work is pretty consistently in the office or in the lab. But in the lab, meaning either I'm collecting experiments, running experiments, or I'm generating data with my computer, because you can also run simulations of experiments. So I review literature, I read, I write, I do all of these things that I used to do as an English major, but now I translate all those skills over to my science. So pretty much what I do all day is either writing or working with data or working with people. So I think being able to communicate and having this teamwork aspect are really essential. I'll spend 3 or 4 hours writing, and then I'll spend 3 or 4 hours doing data analysis, and then I'll be able to share my information and debrief it with my colleagues. And as Ethan said, making time for socializing with your colleagues and having hobbies and having fun are really where it's at. I'm just going to skip through this section because I know it's time, but I just wanted to say last couple things here. I'm really happy with the journey so far. Science is a very rewarding and challenging field. I think that if I could say one thing, I would say try to balance between a challenge, your skills, what makes you happy or your joy, and the resources or the people around you. And I'm excited about the future, and I hope to be some kind of professor or team leader at the lab someday. So I know I really went over time, and so I'm really sorry about that, but I just wanted to say thank you for your attention, and I really appreciate your time, and I wish you luck with everything you do in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I think there's lots of nuggets of wisdom in there. I think we'll have time for maybe one question. Oh, okay. So we have a question. Priyam is saying, it's amazing how you're currently working with machine learning in your research, even though computer science wasn't one of your majors in college. What resources or experiences would you recommend for students to dive into machine learning if they're interested in that, but it's not their primary field of study?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to answer quickly. That's a really great question. I was really intimidated by programming, and I didn't really jive very well with online resources like programs like Coursera or like Learn Along self-led programs because I didn't even know where to start. So what I would recommend is I would find papers that you find genuinely interesting or problems that you are very interested in. Finding papers or projects or publications or any kind of project that's based on that problem that you want to solve, and then kind of build a self-tutorial around that. I was given a project and kind of just set, like, they told me basically, like, here's the data set that we want. We want you to figure it out. And with an open-ended problem like that, I think it can be challenging. So I would say give yourself as many constraints as possible and say, like, okay, today I'm going to learn how to do this or how to learn this type of problem. And then that way you can kind of build off your skill set from there. I don't know if that helps and answers your question, but I think that reading papers, And like practicing is going to be your biggest tool, and working with other people that really know what they're doing. Like if you have someone else in your network that's good at coding, I think they're going to be a really good resource for you too.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Jessica. We're going to move on to our third speaker. So our third speaker is Cullen Roth. Cullen loves using math, statistics, and computer science to study biology. His love for that started when he was an undergrad at the University of New Mexico, where he studied mathematics. His current work uses math, statistics, and computational tools to help study biological threats to our nation. This includes viral and fungal pathogens, which threaten both our public health and the security of agricultural crops. He is originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and still lives there. And in his free time, he loves to garden and has amassed an army of succulents and cacti. Thank you
All
very
right.
much, Cullen, and take it away.
Well, thank you. And thank you to the organizers for this invitation to speak to you all today. And I want to thank both my colleagues here at LANL for absolutely wonderful talks talking about the amazing science that we do at the National Labs. I'm very grateful that you both made homes here in New Mexico and absolutely love it. A little bit about me before we get started. I'm actually, as we said, originally from New Mexico. I was born in Albuquerque. And when I was growing up, I hated mathematics. I was horrible at it. And I too was told, you're not really good at this. You need to find something else. So I guess I heard that enough that when I decided to go to the University of New Mexico for my undergraduate, maybe as kind of a, thinking I wanted to prove everyone wrong, I decided, I want to study mathematics. And what I really had to learn for those of you who are making that transition from high school to college is that college is a time where you get to define yourself and you are responsible for your own learning. And in many ways, you're responsible for your own destiny. And to really be successful, as our previous two speakers said today, you need to find something that you love so that it doesn't feel like work and that you can really commit to it. And I would add that the other, I think, pillar of success for those of you who are thinking about, continuing your education is to find a mentor. And when I was at the University of New Mexico, I was really fortunate to have wonderful mentors who encouraged me, who would teach me, and who would just answer my questions and meet with me to check in with how I was doing and with, what I was thinking about and give me opportunities. And I'm really fortunate, for instance, to work with Maggie Warner Washburn in the biology department at UNM. And being a math major, she helped me become an undergraduate research in actually a neurology lab under Vince Calhoun. And this is where, you get to use really cool skills like mathematics on some really interesting problems that you maybe think are completely unattached to knowing mathematics. And in that lab, was able to study how our brains actually organize information and share resources when you're trying to do something, a visually complex task. And your brain has a really cool way of deciding what resources it needs to devote to certain inputs into both your visual cortex and your audio cortex. So that was a really cool experience that taught me, if you have a skill set like mathematics or, as our other speakers said, chemistry, or these really kind of what we say are hard skills, if you devote your time to really learning the basics of those, you can apply them to various other problems. So when I was an undergrad, I had the opportunity to spend a summer in Massachusetts at the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard. And there I was able to learn under Bruce Buren and in Aviv Regev's lab all about RNA sequencing and how our cells actually transcribe genes. And this was really transformative. So for those of you on today, my other kind of like tidbit is really look for summer research opportunity programs that are far away from where you grew up so that you can just immerse yourself into the culture there and learn something new that you really have no idea uh, before. Like I had no idea really what biology was. I had some neurology background, but the Broad Institute really cemented my desire to use mathematics to study biology. So I returned to New Mexico after that summer. I'm really proud to say I actually graduated with a degree in mathematics, summa cum laude. So for anyone on this call who has said to you, you're not good at math, I want you to know today that's not true. You are good at math. You can become really great at math. You just have to learn to teach yourself. And that's really the hard part. But you can be good at anything and do anything you really want to do. So after my undergrad, I decided that I really wanted to continue my education. I had loved using math to study biology, and I applied to several universities. But I also decided to go to Duke to get a PhD. And I think there was a question earlier about, research opportunities and growth opportunities. And so, for those of you who are interested in kind of internships, I would say that the North Carolina Research Triangle area, aside from Lannel, is a really great place to look for opportunities to really develop your identity and your skill set. While I was at Duke, I was in the lab of Dr. Paul McGuiney, and I again had this math background, but I took this opportunity of going to grad school to change kind of my focus. And in his lab, I actually studied fungal pathogens. I think annually it's estimated that fungal pathogens kill roughly 1 million people a year. And we studied this fungal pathogen called Cryptococcus neoformans, which everyone breathes in. But if your lungs can't clear the infection, they can colonize your lungs and spread to other parts of your body, like your brain. So we were interested in using mathematics and statistics to identify genetic changes in their genome that led them to become what we would call more virulent or better at being infectious. And so this was really rewarding because you get to use math, statistics, computers to make discoveries that could have impacts for other people around the globe and to help make their lives better. And that idea of service when I was graduating from Duke, that really hit home because that was when COVID hit. The day I did my dissertation defense, where I defend my essentially ideas as a scientist and ask them to give me a PhD, Duke shut down, and I was the first to present. Kind of, we didn't really present over Zoom back then, but my dissertation defense was supposed to be this public event with hundreds of people, and I was just speaking to an empty room with a camera and a few of my lab mates. I was allowed to have 4 people in the room total. And so it was a strange opportunity. It was a scary time. I think for those of you who remember, we didn't really know what was going on. And I asked myself, well, I want to do science that could help maybe alleviate this problem and make sure it doesn't happen again. And I also knew that I wanted to move back home to New Mexico and try to develop my career there and be again a part of my community locally here in New Mexico. So after I got my PhD from Duke, I moved back to New Mexico and started looking for another postdoc position. And that's where I found Los Alamos National Labs. And so I came here, I think in 2022, and started working for Sean Starkenberg and Christina Stedman, who are our current leaders in the BGen division. And here we get to work on so many cool and unique problems that have relevance to our national health and our security. And I'm going to talk to you today about like one project I'm really excited about and work on a lot with a bunch of collaborators here at Lannel. So going back to my title slide, my title here today is Constructing 3D Genome Models for Studying Viral Infection. When I started working here at Duke, I have deep backgrounds in mathematics, but my human biology was rather lacking, I can say with a little bit of embarrassment. And I really thought if you were to think about a cell and look inside that cell's nucleus, I thought that DNA existed as chromosomes just all the time, like these kind of cartoon chromosomes here on the right, and that is how DNA was organized. That's completely wrong. That organization really only exists when cells are dividing. The majority of the time, if we were to think about DNA being organized inside our cells, it's a little bit more accurate to think of it as like a giant pot of spaghetti and noodles where they're all highly condensed and wrapped around each other and touching in three-dimensional space. And it turns out that that's actually really important to how our cells function. And what we do here at LANL is use genomic sequencing to understand how our DNA, when it's not organized in chromosomes, like it's shown here on the left inside the nucleus, to understand how it is organized most other times in three-dimensional space. So my colleagues and I use a combination of various skills, and it does take a team. This is not all just me. That's the other, I think, key to doing good science is surrounding yourself with people who are really motivated, just like you, and who are really good at their jobs as well, so that you can all pull from each other's strengths. My friend here, Ankush Segal, he is a great polymer modeler, and he used data that I generated from whole genome sequencing to make this three-dimensional model of how our chromosomes, which are shown here in different colors, are actually organized inside our cellular nucleus. And you can see here again, it's not these space kind of worms that we kind of cartoon draw chromosomes on. It's these balls of yarn that are interwoven and interacting with each other in 3D space. And what we know today is that this shape is actually really important to how your cells develop and how they function. And it really has to do with how in 3D space, distant regions of your genome that are genes can come in contact with regulatory elements of the genome so that they can be activated. And at LANL, we're interested in understanding how these complex interactions in 3D space are altered because of a viral infection or some type of environmental exposure. I'll wrap up by talking about something I'm really passionate about, which is thinking about how chromosomes actually interact with each other inside the nucleus. So here on the left at the top, I'm showing you some healthy lung cells, and you can see they're all kind of close together on this plate. And if we were to sequence their genomes, we can actually create kind of a map of how their chromosomes inside the nucleus touch each other. And that's what I'm showing you here on the bottom. And these black arcs that connect these chromosome models on the side can tell us a lot about how the genome is organized. And I think one thing you'll appreciate when you look at this is that smaller chromosomes tend to interact more often with each other. And we're trying to understand the collection of genes across those chromosomes that actually touch each other more often. But really, like I said, we're interested in what happens to this kind of network when you perturb it or expose it. For instance, at LANL, we're exposing these cells to a seasonal coronavirus. This is called COVID-229E. I can guarantee most of you on this call have had this virus. It causes the common cold. And we want to understand what changes inside the genome to the structure of our chromosomes does this virus actually change and alter. So here on the right, you can see some lung cells that have been infected with this virus, and you can see there's some spots in this place where there aren't cells growing, and in general, they're pretty inflamed and very unhappy. One thing I'm interested in is understanding if we look at how their chromosomes touch each other, are there places where they now are touching each other more often post-infection, where before those genes weren't interacting with each other, but now in three-dimensional space they are post-infection? Conversely, you can ask what connections were lost, what things made the cell healthy as far as their interaction in 3D space that are now gone. And we really want to understand these so that ultimately you could try to create a medicine that would prevent people from getting sick from COVID-like viruses. So you know, the takeaway from the science that we do here is that the genome is dynamic, it changes and it's altered, and we want to understand these alterations and how they affect us. You could imagine this has implications for people who have long COVID, but understanding these three-dimensional changes can help us better understand developmental disorders, things like cancer, other viral infections like the flu. And really, we want to be able to create a diagnostic tool that could help us even say, oh, this person's going to be sick before they even show symptoms, using these three-dimensional interactions in space. So I think with that, I'll thank all of my collaborators here. You know, science, like I said, is a team effort. These are really expert people in modeling, in chemistry, in biology, and I'm really fortunate that I get to bring my kind of math background to help look at and solve these problems. So with that, I'll say thanks again for all of you still listening, and thank you again to the organizers for this opportunity, and thank you for our funding sources and all the American taxpayers. Really appreciate it.
Awesome, thank you. Some really cool stuff you're doing. Uh, we have time for questions. If anyone's got a question, feel free to type it in chat. All right, well, I have a question. What is one of the biggest challenges you faced recently, and how did you overcome that?
Ooh, I think the biggest challenge I faced recently, it can be isolating to have skill sets that are very different from the people around you in your division and your collaborators. And that's just because you've been trained in a very different way and you think about problems in a very different way. The solution is to really meet with your collaborators and find a common language and understand and create a common diction that you all can use when talking about a problem so that you all can be on the same page. And I have found that really rewarding because it allows you to communicate with your own team, but as you bring new members onto your team, you can be kind of a translator and help bring them along too, and that could be really fun.
Awesome. Let's see. So we did have some questions that were posed from people registered for this. So, oh, I think we've got a question. Yes, so Priyam is saying this is amazing, and that she's doing research in virology space as well. So she was really excited to hear about your research. Out of curiosity, what kinds of tools are you using to make the simulations of DNA, and how did you learn to use them?
So my favorite tool that we use is Python, the computer programming language, and coding in general is something that I started doing as an undergrad. My first coding language was a coding language called MATLAB, and once you kind of learn one, you can kind of pick the others up. You'll find that the syntaxes are a little bit different, but they're all the same. Um, and so you kind of learn new languages, not literal languages, but these different languages, and that can be a really great skill that you can take to really any job. Some of the other specific tools that we use are simulate this tool called LAMPS that actually conducts these polymer simulations to make these three-dimensional models. And I'm striking out on a third tool that we use, but I would say Python coding, LAMP simulations, and for those of you who like R coding, these are all like the statistical tools that we use a lot.
Yeah, and I will say, just to follow up on the point of learning one thing can be applied to a whole bunch of different stuff. I also use Python and MATLAB, and I study things that blow up. So, I would say I blow things up and measure it with lasers. So coding is a really versatile skill that can be applied even outside of like national labs and like pure scientific research. All right, we've got another question. Ashani is asking, what are some skills that you learned after joining LANL?
Oh, I really learned a lot about human biology, and that took a lot of self-teaching. But that's really when someone says they have a PhD, that's really all that means is that they know how to teach themselves. And so it took a lot of self-learning because I had to learn how my colleagues who are human geneticists and viral geneticists, how they think about problems. I had to learn how to communicate with them. Um, I had to learn a lot about how to work on a high performance computing cluster. There are specific skills that you need when you think about parallelization and time management. Oh, time management. Somewhere my mother heard that. That are really critical to being successful when working in those high performance computing environments. So those are some of the harder skills that I learned when I started working at LANL.
All right. Well, I think I'm going to open it up to questions that you have for all of our speakers. I have a question for Ethan, because you mentioned you study the breath. Is it true that you lose weight when you breathe out?
I suppose you could say technically you are exhaling metabolites out of your body. So there are certain things that your lungs are designed to get rid of whenever you're exhaling. It's so infinitesimal compared to everything else. It's unfortunately a terrible weight loss strategy, but I will tell you that the chemistry going on in your lungs and how things are being excreted by your body through your breath, absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, was there anything surprising that you saw people breathing out?
There were a lot of things. I kind of brought up the Burt's Bees. There were a lot of things that I kind of would have assumed would have been contaminants. But we have so many personal care products that we use with, things like beeswax, right? That I would have in my Burt's Bees, practically necessary for living in New Mexico. But that would absolutely show up in your breath as a bunch of, lipids and polymers and other things. So a lot of that stuff, food metabolites, there were tons of those things common from plants, or there was one that's very common in butter. Things like that were really interesting.
I guess a question, and some of you touched on this, but in case you want to elaborate more um, or speak in if you didn't. So they want to know, what other paths or options did you consider before landing where you are? Feel free to just jump in.
When I was younger, I wanted to be a ballroom dancer. And I had a very frank conversation with my parents, and they asked me, "Well, do you feel like you're good enough to support a family of four or more with ballroom dancing?" And I had to honestly say no. At the time, I was minoring in mathematics, and so then I switched it to my major. But I'm really glad I did, because math is just so much fun and it's so cool. But dancing's fun too, so.
Do you still get any opportunities to dance?
Oh yeah. No, dancing is another skill set and exercise for the younger folks on the line. You can do your entire life. So I highly recommend taking a dancing course in college. They're so much fun, and you get to meet very different people from you, but it's just this really great shared experience, and you make these relationships that you'll have for the rest of your life. So I highly encourage it as just an exercise. It's truly tons of fun.
I think for me, I basically kept doing the thing that made the most sense to me. I loved chemistry in high school, loved it in undergrad. There are plenty of days when it's miserable and it will make you miserable. But it kept making sense to me, so I just kept doing it. So I honestly didn't bounce around a lot, but I think it's, you play with Legos as a kid, you enjoy working with building blocks, you just kind of take that into your adulthood. So don't feel bad about that.
I guess I can share quickly that, yeah, I actually applied also to programs for graduate work in biology, in evolutionary biology, evolutionary marine biology. And I think ultimately what made the decision between one or the other was, and also for medical school, was just getting more experience in that area. So like when I was living in a different country, I got to experience what like the work and daily life of being a professional marine biologist felt like and looked like. And it wasn't exactly what I was expecting it was going to be. And so sometimes having experiences in the area that you're considering or talking to somebody that you are considering going into their field is also really helpful. So I found out that, it's more like what I want to do. So also really interested in video game design. But like I didn't have any coding experience at the time. So it wouldn't have worked out at the time, but it was a really cool option too.
All right, feel free to chat or post any other questions in chat. We had another one from someone who was registered. How important was graduate school to your career, and why did you choose to go? Feel free to jump in.
I'll take that one first, I guess. Graduate school was extremely important in my career because I wanted a credential that communicated to others that I knew how to problem solve and that I had skills that I could apply to various problems, and that I could also have a credential that communicated that I could lead a team. And so for me, that meant getting a PhD. I would say that, getting a PhD, depending on what you want to do, you may not need one. It's very dependent on your field, and your career and kind of what you want out of your life. But I've known people who, didn't get a PhD, who have master's degrees, who are making a lot more money than I am, who are very happy with their career choice, and have the skills that they need to be successful. So it's really about kind of what you want to do for yourself, I would say, in choosing a PhD versus a master's versus just going into the field that you're interested in.
Yeah, this is Ethan. For me, pretty critical. I knew that I, at a certain point, wanted to get a PhD. Before that, all over the place. I applied to officer candidate school. I had no idea what I wanted to do after undergrad. I will tell you, if you get to grad school and you spend 2 semesters there and it's not for you, do not feel bad. Tons of people have done that. There's tons of people that have started off to get a PhD and moved on to get a master's. There is absolutely no shame in that. You are in control of your destiny. And if that's what you want to do, go for it. I will also tell you right now in our lab, we have 2 undergrad researchers that are working with us that if we could find a way to keep them, we would. I can tell you that a really self-motivated, hard-working undergrad in a lab, especially like ours, worth their weight in gold. So you do not have to get a PhD. You don't have to have a master's. It's like I said, work hard, and people will recognize that.
All right, well, I think we are almost out of time, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you again to all of our fabulous speakers. And just to remind everyone, this was recorded and will be on our YouTube channel, so you can check it out later, or send it along to people who were unable to join us today. Also, Sage is on social media, and so you can go ahead and follow us. We're at Sage's Camp, SAGE Is there really an S, Danny? SAGES camp.
I know. We need to remove it, but it says it's camp right now. Correct.
Okay, got it. Okay, so but yeah, so go ahead, and you can also always go to mysagejourney.org to learn more. We do this Sage Live event once a month on a Saturday, and so the next Sage Live event will be February 8th, and it's going to be about a space project called Lucy Night, a radio telescope that will land on the far side of the moon. So if that sounds like something interesting, go ahead and check us out on February 8th. And thank you again. And I hope you all have a fabulous weekend.
Thank you.